back during the Reagan administration when George Herbert Walker Bush was primarily in charge, and Colonel Oliver North was deeply involved in the Iran-Contra scandal, as it came to be known. North issued some plans for the military takeover of the United States for martial law. And among the things that they said they would activate martial law against were, one would be a nuclear war, which is somewhat understandable, but also widespread dissent of a U.S. invasion abroad. So according to plans that were laid back in the 80s, if enough people said they're against the war, then they could declare martial law.
There has been a lot of stuff that's been laid down in the backgrounds of the recent laws that gives the Secretary of Health and Human Services an appointed official, not an elected official that has any accountability to the general public, really control over what is used in terms of a vaccine or drugs, who is going to be rounded up and quarantined, and who is going to be examined that they might be infectious.
Back in the 1980s, during the Reagan administration, there was a project called Rex 84 that was released. And in this project, or this plan, they called for all the bases that were being closed down from the budget cuts, the military budget cuts. These bases closed down. However, when you go back to some of these bases today and take a look at them, there's a very interesting thing that's occurred. The military bases used to have fences with barbed wire that faced out to keep people from the outside from getting into a secure area. Now a lot of these bases that have been closed down has the barbed wire facing in, as if to keep people from the inside from getting out. Now why would this occur? Is it possible that there is or was a long-term plan that would eventually anticipate rounding up large numbers of people to withhold them? Now, we apply this into a scenario today. We know that we've got these terrible terrorists all over the world that want to do us harm. And we know that there's the threat of chemical and biological attack. In the event that there was a biological attack, or maybe an outbreak of a virus or a flu, and the powers that be had a plan for mandatory vaccinations for everybody, undoubtedly there would be a lot of people, myself included, that would refuse to take a mandatory vaccine. Is it possible that they've anticipated this and are going to want to round up all the people that refuse to comply and hold them in detention centers for their own good? Is it possible that this whole plan has been in place for decades?
As a result of my experience in the military, I was vaccine injured, and I've made sort of a statement that I will never take another vaccine as long as I live, nor will I ever give another vaccine. I had no idea the damages that could be caused by vaccines, the dangers involved.
There were a couple of things that George Bush made a comment about with the bird flu. One was he pushed forward the agenda to give the pharmaceutical company complete liability protection by saying incorrectly that the pharmaceutical companies need to be protected, that the reason that they aren't getting into the vaccine business is because they're being sued for their inferior products. The other thing that he talked about was the fact that this could be such a rampant pandemic that we would have to pull out the National Guard, possibly mobilize the military in order to quarantine and containment. It's actually been shown in the literature that those types of enforcement arms aren't very effective. And like I said, people who are very sick, they self-quarantine. I mean, when you've got a bad case of the flu, you're not out going to the grocery store, you're home in bed. So to be able to enforce people to do that is really heavy-handed.
Cooperation is mandatory in a communitarian society. You will do what you are told, and they have the techniques and they have the technology to invade pretty much every area of your life.
We've already talked to the police. The police departments in various countries are already getting involved of how they are going to be enrolled in the whole process of mandatory quarantine, and perhaps even things like directing traffic to the vaccinations, to the schools where the vaccines are being administered, because there'll be enough people, because they run on a basis of fear, that will stampede to the local place that's giving the vaccine, because they aren't informed and they don't understand what's in the vaccine or what the problems are that are associated with it. But the 25% that decide, or the percentage of whatever that says, I don't want to have anything to do with that, the enforcement arm could very well come through the national ID card or something along those lines that shows proof of vaccination.
They're trying to get the American people to take a national ID card. It's simply an identification card that will have all of your personal information on it. And it is what they do in every totalitarian country. America's been different than other countries because we limited the power of our federal government. The national ID card will allow the federal government to know your every action, your every transaction, and to track you from early morning until late at night, 24 hours a day, from the day you're born until the day you die.
RFID stands for radio frequency identification. It's a technology that uses miniature computer chips. Some of these are smaller than a grain of sand to track items from a distance. And they're hooked up to little miniature antennas. The combination is called an RFID tag. Now, each of these little chips has a unique identification number that's sort of like a social security number for things. Big companies like Procter & Gamble, Walmart, Gillette, and even our own government, including the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and the U.S. Postal Service, would like to put one of these RFID tags on every manufactured item on planet Earth, and they're already putting them into some identity documents like U.S. passports and potentially driver's licenses. RFID radio waves can travel through solid objects like purses, backpacks, wallets, shirts, shoes, and communicate their number to reader devices in the environment. And these reader devices can be hidden in doorways, under floor tiles, and ceiling tiles, and secretly, silently, and invisibly glean this unique RFID number from the objects that people are wearing and carrying. And of course, this number is more than just a number. I mean, it can link to unlimited information in a database about the product from the time it's manufactured to the time it's disposed. It could have the identity of the person carrying the object on it, perhaps even linked to credit information about the person who purchased it. The government already is buying private data on consumers, and many of us don't even know it. And they're mining this data to find patterns and find people of interest. Right now it happens to be terrorists. Of course, tomorrow, who is a person of interest might change. And while they say today they just want to use this in the warehouses to track widgets from point A to point B, we know that they have other plans. My co-author, Kathleen Albrecht, and I found patent applications at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. One of them is by a company, IBM, and it's called Identification and Tracking of Persons Using RFID Tagged Items. IBM talks about the government using this technology to track people in public places with something they call the Person Tracking Unit. And the places they want to track people include airports, train stations, bus stations, libraries, sports arenas, museums, theaters, elevators, and even restrooms. These tags, if they're on all the products, and these scanners, if they're ubiquitous, as is the plan by major corporations, we could have a Big Brother surveillance society.
In Texas, you must have your premises registered. Then you must tag every animal. When I say animal, we're talking about chickens in your backyard. I'm talking about your kids' rabbits that they have for a 4-H project. And they have even gone so far in Texas as to say pet birds. In other words, if you have a pair of parakeets or parrots, then Grandma's going to have a tag and a premise ID for her parrots. And if she doesn't have, she can be fined $1,000 per day for every day that she does not have those animals tagged properly. I've talked to a lot of Texans that think this animal ID thing, oh, it's great. See, we broadcast in Texas. We have radio affiliates in Texas. And until I came on and talked about it, they thought, oh, this was really going to help because it was going to stop the mad cow disease if it came about. They don't realize how much freedom is being lost there. And besides, if you sell an animal, or if an animal dies, you have to let the Department of Agriculture know where that animal is. If it's dead, you have to let them know that it died. There's no way you can do this. There's no way ranchers in Texas know when animals die. We're talking about big country. We're talking about sections of land. A section 640 acres, and it's nothing to have 10, 15, 20 sections of land, particularly in southwest Texas. They don't know when the coyotes kill a calf. They have no idea. It just comes up missing at gathering time. If they can make this animal ID thing work, if they can tag every cow, sheep, pig, chicken, dog, cat, parrot, whatever it happens to be, and they can make people get a premise number, and if they can make people get a tag in those animals, then they're going to be able to make you and I be tagged exactly the same way.